was raised LDS, and from his earliest recollection of his church experience was asking questions because things didn't make sense, and he was excused to go sit in the hall.
Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to meet with me, Doug. Please tell us your full name, the current position you hold, and how you came to be in that position.
My name is Doug Fogelsong. My title is Community Spiritual Leader, which is another phrase to say Senior Minister of this Center for Spiritual Living, Greater Las Vegas. I've been here since July of 1999. In our denomination, we can candidate for an open pulpit, which means we find out the availability of the job. We go to that place if we are invited by their search committee, and we give a sermon, and the process differs, but it's a self-selected opportunity, and then the congregation has final say as to who they accept.
Please tell us a little bit about your family of origin, where you were born, where you grew up.
I was born and raised in Northeast Ohio in a relatively small town outside of Akron. I'm third in line of 4 children. I have 3 sisters, no brothers. My parents, classic 50s parents. My dad worked, pharmacist. My mother was a housewife for most of my youth, and then she began to work on her own as well.
What, if any, religion were you raised in?
We were raised Presbyterian.
Do you have any post-secondary education?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree. It's been a while. Bachelor of Arts in theater, with an emphasis in theater, from the University of Akron in Ohio. And then my ministerial training at the Holmes Institute.
And is that an accredited university?
It is now. When I went through it, it was not. It was simply within the denomination. Now there is an accredited master's degree offered.
What's the name of the denomination?
This is Centers for Spiritual Living.
And it changed its name recently. What was its name prior to that?
Originally it was called the Church of Religious Science.
And why did it change?
I'll give you 2 main reasons. In this country especially, people are not as interested in church as they are in spirituality. At least the people who we're reaching out to. So to take the word church out of it took that barrier away for many people. The other thing about religious science as a name is that it in this country is confused with many other, not many, but a couple of other faiths or practices that don't have a very good reputation sometimes. And rather than have us be embarrassed or ashamed about what it was that we were believing in.
They heard Scientology.
They heard Scientology, they heard Christian Science, they heard some other, those kinds of things that, for better and for worse, there's not a lot that is actually known about them, but a lot of mythology has sprung up around them, and preconceived ideas are really tough to get around. That plus we're interested in expanding more of our presence around the world, and to have church as the official name is a very difficult thing in some countries.
Where it's predominantly Muslim or Hindu might be a problem.
That, or where there's a state religion, you can't really establish another church. So if we have a teaching center, if we have an ongoing concern that is based on education, that's a whole different idea than establishing a church. In our understanding of the school of New Thought, Christian Science isn't a part of that. They are separate from New Thought in that the woman who revealed that teaching, Mary Baker Eddy, said, this is it. This is all there is to the truth. There is no more truth than this. This is it. If you get this, you'll get it all. Throughout history, at least as far as I understand it, there have been constant revisions as to what that actually means. If there's an end date for humanity to exist, it always gets extended. If there's ever any final word on truth, then more is revealed through the human apparatus of that particular divinity. So I really appreciate my own faith that the founder of it, the person who kind of revealed it as a system, said we have to stay open at the top. There is no way that the human intellect can stop evolving, and our discoveries continue to grow. So incorporate all that gets discovered into this philosophy and into these principles, because there's always more to know about something that's infinite.
Please outline for us the basic principles as you see them of New Thought.
New Thought as a movement has its roots in some Eastern philosophies and traditions. Eastern meaning Indian, Hindu, some Buddhist kinds of things. But it really began in New England in the 19th century. And the principle behind New Thought, or the concept, is that the human mind influences one's environment to the extent that, in essence, mind creates your world. Not the world, but your world. My mind creates my experience of the world. Your mind does the same thing. One's mind creates that.
If my mind creates my experience of the world, does it also create the reality of my world, or only the way I experience that reality? Does it actually change some objective reality?
I guess yes, except what is objective. You know, in order to be...
something that a third-party independent observer would agree upon.
Yes. Yes. And the way I can prove that for myself is when I get with my sisters and we talk about an event that we all experienced together in childhood or any other time we were together, and there are likely 4 different interpretations of that experience. So from the inside, my experience is different. From an observer's perspective, the event happens, but my experience of it is the reality for me. Just as the observer's experience of it is the reality for them. I feel like I'm talking in circles, but...
My understanding is that if I believe that I'm likely to succeed at a particular endeavor, that will influence my actual outcome the same way as if I believe in the likelihood of my failure in a particular endeavor will influence my actual outcome.
Yes.
So in that way, my thoughts impact actual observable reality. I got the sale, the enterprise succeeded, I got the girl, whatever the endeavor might have been, my thoughts are going to directly impact that.
Yes. Yeah, was it Henry Ford that said, if I think I can, I'm right. If I think I can't, I'm right.
Well, I think he did say that, but I think he was repeating Abe Lincoln.
Yeah. I mean, and so again, and one of the cliches of New Thought is there's no such thing as New Thought, it's ancient. You know, there's never a new thought. This is ancient wisdom, ancient truth that has been known by, well, I mean, if you look at the mystical aspect of any faith, what they're talking about seems to be the same thing. We just word it differently according to the context of the world we live in, or our religion. But the mystical arm of Islam, the mystical arm of Judaism, the mystical arm of Christianity, all of them, the people who wrote and spoke about it from that place are saying the same thing. You know, the unity of all creation, the oneness that is God, those kind of things. And we've lost it in ritual and rules and power struggles and costumes and
politics
and that.
So is there a list of principles that you could outline that you think would be a good starting point?
It is done as you believe, which we've just talked about. That the kingdom of heaven is within. You know, it's at hand right now. It's within me. It's up to me to experience it.
You would say that the kingdom is within means that it's inside each and every one of us only. There's not some external kingdom with a castle on the hill glowing as we envision in our Western thought.
Yeah, I believe that heaven and hell are states of mind or consciousness.
States of awareness.
States of awareness, or a degree of my awareness of connection with my source, which I call God. So if I'm feeling connected with it, I'm in heaven. If I'm feeling disconnected or removed from it, I'm in hell. And I swing between the two on a regular basis. I think everybody does. Well, the late Pope John Paul kind of wrote, one of his last things was about that idea of the sense of separation from God is what hell is. You know, it's like that's exactly what it is.
Is there a way to ascertain truth? Capital T, truth.
I think it begins with a resonance that I feel within me first, that yes, this sounds right for me and to me. And then my life is the only way that I can prove anything to me, to myself, beyond a doubt. So I work with it in as many areas as I can to see if it actually works for me. And then I listen to other people in a counseling session, in the receiving line on Sunday, in my family, in my life, and I listen to the ways it's showing up in their life. And I'm thinking, this sounds pretty universal. So if it's universal, that must be truth. If it's the same for everybody, everywhere, then it must be. But it's really, it begins with an intuitive sense, but I can only figure out how to get to it by empirical evidence and experimenting with it.
Can you give us an example of some truth that you believe you've discovered in that method?
That my thinking creates my experience. Very much. I mean, that's a working out of principle.
So how did you demonstrate that for
That
yourself?
thought is creative. Well, at first it felt right to me. It made sense. And then when I entered into this teaching in Southern California back in the 1980s, I began to take the classes that were offered because this was set up as a teaching order first and foremost, to learn what the truths are that we believe are universal and then begin to apply them to your life. And so I began to work with the idea of techniques like affirmation and affirmative prayer and things like that. But also in just paying more attention, becoming more aware of what I'm doing in my life, the words that I use, the actions that I take, which reflect the beliefs that I carry, and all of them out picture. Again, if I say I can, I'm right. If I say I can't, I'm right.
When you say out picture, that means the thought is in your mind and it shows up in the physical universe.
Right. I mean, our shorthand for that is thoughts are things, or thoughts become things. We believe that the first act of creation that science calls the Big Bang was the thought of God, was the energy of creation is the thought of God bringing forth the universe. We reenact that in our individual lives because we have this wonderful gift of consciousness. And almost 10 years ago now, we had a shooting happen of a congregant right outside the church before service began.
Oh my.
It was like, how can this be an expression of God? How can God be in this? And those are the hard questions, but those are the most important ones, because if this premise is valid, it has to be valid all the time. There is no exception that proves it. Certain notions that many of us have about God or proof of God means that it's going to be loving and peaceful and pain-free and all of that. Then if it's not that, if pain is involved, if there's tragedy involved, then God must be absent. It's like, no, that's an incomplete understanding of this allness. Why do we assume that because it's unpleasant or difficult that it's absent divinity? I don't believe that. And it's important at some point in my living of this life to look for it at some point. Maybe not immediately, handle the immediate, crisis, but eventually I have to come to spiritual terms with it.
Is there a relatively simple or easy, non-threatening exercise that one of our viewers could implement to demonstrate to themselves that our thoughts are directly expressed into our external reality?
Yeah, Sure. Whenever the end of the day is, review it. What was the preponderance of your thinking? Because it's not about, we believe that thoughts are things. Thought is creative. Every thought has an impact. And yet it is the overall atmosphere of my thinking that create the overall atmosphere of my life. So if at the end of a day, I can look back on that day and see where we used to say I got up on the wrong side of the bed. Well, when I get up on the wrong side of the bed and begin my day with that attitude, things tend to continue to go wrong.
They go left instead of right.
Exactly. And so that's one way of disproving it. But you just look back. You could just look back on a half a day, take a lunch break, and take a look and just see, how have I been showing up? How have I faced my life, and what have the results been?
So it's not really a directly one-to-one correlation where I think hanger and a hanger shows up. But if I'm thinking conflict, it's going to tend to manifest conflicts in my life.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm thinking accord, it's going to tend to manifest